Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your media questions 7 days a week. And we have a little special here. We were talking about interfaces and simple interfaces and how to just get someone who's a talent just connected to Zoom or other things online. And George Whittam, who is an OG, he's been here in and out for many years, has actually designed one of these. And so we thought we'd bring him on just for a couple minutes to kick off the hour. George, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me back again. Yeah, I am kind of an OG. I really enjoy what this show is doing for the media world, and I refer people to it all the time. And thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
So good to have you back. And now you designed this little piece of hardware. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, this is a collaborative design. So this is like by podcasters for podcasters, if you really want to say that, because this is called the Pro Audio Suite, or the Passport VO for the Pro Audio Suite podcast. So this audio interface was designed with the name VO in the name. That might give you a hint as to who it's designed for.
That's really for those of you who haven't seen George on the show before, that's your thing, right? You coach people who are doing VOs and getting their whole setup ready to go.
Yeah, anything technology-wise, from figuring out why their Apollo console isn't sending an audio signal or creating an infinite loop in their source connect connections, to designing the acoustics of their space, to explaining to them why they're not booking, and it's not because their gear is bad, it's because they can't act, all that kind of stuff. I try to keep in my lane. I try not to get too coachy. I really am a tech person, but that's what I do.
So tell us more about this entrance.
So the idea behind this little guy, the Passport VO, is we wanted a product for voice actors that will simplify a few very esoteric things that actory right-brainy people have a really hard time with, which is such as, how do I record myself, be connected to somebody on Zoom at the same time, and then when they ask us, hey, will you play back that last take because we were looking at our phones instead of listening to you while we were sitting in the studio, in some studio far, far away, can you play back that last take? And that makes a lot of voice actors collapse in fear or cry or just go, I can't do that. And that kind of being able to play back and have the mix minus ability is a core part of the product. It's baked into the internal analog circuit. It's a dual USB interface. Everything inside the unit really is analog signal flow until it reaches its two different separate ADAs and USB converters. So it has two complete USB audio interfaces.
You can connect it to two different computers at the same time?
You could connect it to two different computers. You could connect it to a computer and a phone. I think a lot of folks will just be connecting it to a single computer, in which case then you would see two sets of sound drivers show up in your system. You'd see a record driver and you'd see a comms driver. And so all of you guys are going, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Record is for your DAW. And comms is for everything else. And it's a separation of church and state there. And now you have very easy ways to control the two between each other, including a comms knob right here, which controls the return from comms. So, for example, if I was connected to our actual comms system for the show right now, which I'm not, I could have that on this knob here and turn it down just to the level I like to hear it, just barely there, so it's not blasting in my cans. And so for a lot of voice actors, that would mean the talkback from the studio or the director or the clients who are all putting in their 2 cents about how you should say the and coke and all that stuff.
And that's not going into the record.
Unless you wanted to.
Unless you want, and you could theoretically record both, right?
You could. There is a multifunction switch on the business end of the product. Down here, it's hard to see, I know, but there's a black switch right here.
I think.
That end panel shot is the key. So if you show the end panel shot, the end panel shot shows there's a switch that allows this thing to have 3 distinct different personalities. So personality 1 is really what voice actors typically would use, which means channel left is your mic. You can have 2 different mics and hit one button to switch between them. So a lot of voice actors have a shotgun and a large diaphragm condenser, and having a single push button to A/B between them very easily is something that does not exist in any other product that we're aware of, without buying another box to do that job. And then this switch decides whether channel 2, really channel 1 is always one thing, your mic, full stop. You never have to think
Right.
about what's on channel 1. Channel 2, though, is decided by what this switch is doing, and that could be either a minus 12 dB safety channel of channel 1. It could be just input 2 to record both mics, like a standard 2-channel interface, or it can be channel 3 mode, or switch position 3 mode is the return from comms being recorded to channel 2, and that would be more like the interview mode for podcasters, that kind of thing.
Right. So, and that way you could keep track of what the notes are. For instance, you could have a second channel there. So whatever was going back and forth, you get those notes. Or if you were interviewing, you would have that return channel that would just be it would be completely separate. It's a completely separate driver. It's not even stereo.
Yeah, the driver thing being separate is such a key thing. There's other products doing that, like the Rodecaster and stuff. But the thing is, like, for a lot of people, especially the Windows users, where ASIO drivers steal the sound device and then fight you, and then it can be very frustrating if you're not a master at a Jedi master of Windows.
So it just shows up as kind of a dumb driver. I mean, this is one of the things that we've used. MixPre, or I'm sorry, not MixPres, but USB Pre 2s. One of the things we like about them is you plug them in and they just go, "Hello, I'm here." Like there's no like software or negotiation. Everything's controlled by dip switches. In your case, some more analog switches, where all the figuring out what it does is all on your box. You don't have to have a piece of software that's going to figure it out.
Now, for example, if you wanted to ship this out to a field reporter because they just need to get interviews in the field, and maybe they have to record a phone call real quick, you would have all the switches preset for them. They would just get it in you could ship it to them in like a case like this size with that thing in there. And they would know that the switches are set correctly. They couldn't possibly mess them up without using a SIM card tool, a little tiny pick. Right. To adjust those switches, So
it's good it could be potentially for a kit that you want to just send out to anybody on the remote, not just a reporter, but like if someone you want to interview, you could just send it out and just say, all you got to do is open it up, plug things in, and it'll work.
That's the idea, exactly. And because the two USB interfaces are fully analogly, they're not connected by digital means. They're not on the same word clock. So one could be running at 2496, the other one could be running at 1644.1 for Zoom or something. Right. They don't step on each other. They don't interfere with each other. And that was a tough part of the circuit design, is keeping those things electronically separate without any interference, clocking noise, all that stuff. It's a very packed little device with real capacitors and real discrete. It's got a discrete
now with capacitors.
Yeah, it's got a discrete circuit board in there. It's warm. Yeah, it's warm to the touch right now.
Chris, I know you had a bunch of questions before the show. What did you want to add anything here? Did we answer them? Go ahead.
No, not at all. First off, this looks so cool. It is really, really inspiring just aesthetically how it's laid out. I really like the LED, just the metering on it feels really, really great. And it seems incredibly flexible, which I think is the most important thing ever. One thing I'm wondering right off the bat is that a battery powered? Is that something that can be traveled with? Also, it just seems so flexible. Is there a means to be able to maybe track onto like an SD card off of that? Mm-hmm. Something that's smaller than a laptop in like a battery used environment where you can go in the middle of a field and use it as like a field recorder, things like that. I love that you can do simultaneous
it has a sibling. Okay, and the product, so the company Centrance makes a line of products that have the same form factor. So if anybody's familiar at all with this brand, it's Centrance it's Entrance with the letter C in front, Centrance. If you're familiar, they have another product called the Mixer Face, and then they have another one called the Portcaster. And I've used them extensively and have had them. The Portcaster would be the tool that describes exactly what you're describing. That is an internally battery-powered device with a built-in micro SD card recorder, and it does exactly what you're describing. So that is the product for that use case. This does not have a recorder, and it does not have a battery. And that was purposeful because it is again, a bespoke, purpose-designed product. Yeah, there's the Portcaster. Also a great product in its own right. It's got a TRRS jack, so you can jack that into any mobile laptop or phone with the right adapter, and now it becomes a phone patch, Okay. Very clever as well. Awesome. great design. But this is a different idea with the mix minuses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so you could plug a battery into it, though. You could use the second USB port as a battery for a battery if you don't have a phone that will power it. I have found that with a USB-C phone, such as an iPhone 15 Pro, which is what I have, I don't need a battery. The phone now actually powers the device, which is great. And any Android phone, I think, would probably power it as well, because USB-C, that's a standard, I believe. Is there a standard of how USB-C carries anything? I don't know. Yeah. But it can power the device right off an iPhone.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, well, you already answered one of the questions I had was, does it record locally? And I'm not sure, is it 24-bit and 16-bit, and can it do 32-bit? Is that even possible over USB as a USB audio device?
32-bit float, this is not a 32-bit float AD converter. It's a 24-bit AD converter. And yes, there is a product from Zoom called the UC-A202 that I have that is USB and does do 32-bit float recording. So that is capable now over USB 3 and higher, I guess. And maybe it needs to be 3.1. But whatever the higher bit rate bus USB can handle those higher bit rates. But this is 192, I believe, is this. I believe it tops out at 192. Far higher than any broadcaster.
And is the sample rate selectable via the magic dip switches in the bottom? Or
you don't control sample rate from the device. That's going to be driven by, because it's a USB class compliant device. It doesn't require any control. See, that's another beauty of it. There's no firmware panel. There's no console panels. There's no LCD screens. There's no tiny menus. It's
I just don't know why you would need a whole bunch of little interfaces all stacked up together to replace this product. Sorry, this is with a little controller and a button. Anyway, that's one of our older.
I love all this stuff, but this stuff makes an actor break out in hives. And actors
totally.
Are people.
That would give that little setup that I just showed gave me a headache thinking about how we had to okay, this has to go in and out of this, and this has to go in and out of that, and It's very, very old.
That's the idea here. This is meant to make the performer feel more at ease doing. And again, voice actors don't typically do live, like a live announce is a thing, but they don't do that from home. What they do from home is they do live appearances in front of a very small, expensive audience. The casting, the directors, the client at the ad agency, et cetera, and and they're being recorded live over things like Source Connect. And so every little sound they make, everything is being heard through their $20,000, $50,000 monitors. It's a stressful situation. Being able to cut the mic like at any moment and not have to worry about them hearing you is such a, things like that is what people need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris, did you have anything else that I cut you off there?
Sorry about that. I was wondering, is this Mac and PC based?
It's class compliant USB, so it's agnostic. Okay. As long as it can talk to your typical USB mic, it'll talk to this thing. So yeah, it doesn't matter. iOS, Android, Linux, it doesn't.
And I
care.
imagine that once an actor figures out how to get this working, they do very little changes. Like it's a simple. There's buttons, there's knobs, and they don't have to figure a lot out.
They're just touching what's on this top panel right here. That's it, And even then, they don't need to touch half those knobs anyway. If they have two mics and they set their two gains and their two phantom power switches and their two high pass filter switches appropriately for those mics, like if they're on a TLM 103, the first thing we do is turn on the high pass filter. Once those are set, they can seamlessly switch between those two mics and not mess with gains or anything. If you do animation, you might have one mic set much lower. So when you're doing those death screams and shouting and laughing, you've got a different mic input and everything. So it's just, again, it's a workflow thing.
And did you guys build the preamps, or are those outsourced?
Centrance does their own preamp circuit. They call it Jasmine. Every company likes to give their preamps a name, and they call it Jasmine. And the first thing people notice when they plug them in is really how clean the pre's are. They're just really... It's hard to describe, what good pre's and good headphone amps sound like, but this one has very hi-fi, arguably high fidelity, hi-fi level circuitry in it, which kind of makes it unusual for its size. If it wasn't so tiny, people would have an easier time understanding it, but it's so small. So it's like, wait a minute, how can it be hi-fi if it's portable like that? But it is. It's pretty cool. It's a really cool circuit design. You have to look at their site and you can find pictures of the circuit boards. It's packed. It is packed, and it's fully serviceable. You could send this to any tech that knows circuit design, and they could replace parts that go bad over the years. Everything's serviceable.
That's great. And what? Give us the name again, so that we can.
It's made by Centrance, and it's called the Passport with one S, Passport VO. So that's it. So
how much is it?
And it's $699.
That's great.
And I think there are 10 in the first batch still on the website at centrance.com/passportvo that are available to ship, because we had 100 units pre-ordered that have been delivered at this point.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Thanks. Happy to hang and answer and be a part of the panel. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Good to have you here. Maybe we'll drag you in more often. Wednesdays are our big audio day. That's why we wanted you to come in today,
I know. Wednesdays are my 18-hour day. That's why it's brutal to start this early.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Yeah.
Our first question is from Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California. A&H CQ series using AUX 6 quarter-inch TRS into ATEM Mini Pro. Sounds terrible on stream. Signal is clean out of the board and all ATEM processing is off. Suggestions for cable, adapter, direct box. Settings for ATEM to use the mono input.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of things going on with the ATEM, and I'm going to suggest a piece of hardware to really make this work properly, but there's a couple things you're going to want to know before you do anything, and I'm just going to show you those settings. So in your ATEM software control panel, you're going to want to change the factory default settings, which default to microphone signal for those 3.5 millimeter jacks that you see on your ATEM. So you're going to want to set these to line level. That's the first step, okay? Because we're dealing with line level signals, not microphone signals, and line level signals are a lot hotter. The next thing that I would suggest that you do is get a box, like Radial makes a converter box. So we're dealing with professional balance +4 dBu signals coming out of your Allen Heath console, and the ATEM takes consumer level -10 dBV. So we're talking different voltages, different signals, different impedances. So Radial makes this box called the JISO. It is a passive device, meaning does not require power. So you plug the quarter-inch TRS outputs you're going to have to get cables to go from quarter-inch TRS to male XLR. Then on the other end of that, it goes to your unbalanced jacks, and you can see on the back of this, they give you a variety of different connectors. They're all unbalanced. But you get photo disappeared here. You get RCA jacks. You also get 3.5. So you can choose which way you want to connect. 3.5 millimeter to 3.5 is the most common. So you would get that type of cable. And this will properly convert those signals down to the level that the ATEM needs. And then you can adjust attenuate the signal here at the Radial box as well to make sure you're not clipping the converters. And you do have to be very careful because the ATEM's audio conversion, I know this from testing it, the analog to digital converters are not fantastic. And when they clip, it sounds really, really nasty. So you're going to have to make sure that you allow yourself a lot of headroom on these.
Good, Jeff.
Alexander's got a lot of it. First thing is making sure you're not clipping by switching the line. And the second thing is being very careful. The problem that people run into is we have something that looks like the same connector. That's the TRS. And whether it's quarter-inch or eighth-inch, doesn't matter. There are 3 conductors there. Coming out of the Allen Heath, that is a mono signal that is balanced. So the 3 wires are hot, cold, and shield. The hot is the audio. The cold is the same audio, inverted polarity. And then on the ATEM, that is a stereo unbalanced. So the tip is the left positive audio and the ring is the right positive audio. If you take a mono balanced TRS and plug it into a stereo unbalanced TRS, now your positive signal is going to the left channel and your negative signal is going to the right channel, and all kinds of bad things will happen. And Alice will tell you if you accidentally then broadcast this in mono, they will cancel each other out. And so all of these are ways that you will get terrible audio. But it's usually worse going the other direction, taking a stereo and plugging into a mono input, because then you get the difference signal. So you cancel everything that is mono, like vocals and bass and snare drum and all those sorts of things. So I'm thinking your problem is probably that you are just overdriving that input. Second, besides the radial, if you don't want to spend that much, definitely radial is worth the money. The Art Cleanbox Pro is also a good option for going from a professional balanced line level +4 down to a consumer level -10 dBV unbalanced signal.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, exactly what both Alexander and Jeff mentioned. You're out of most professional mixing consoles, you're pushing out balanced professional line level, which is +4 dBU, out of the board, while the ATEM minis are expecting unbalanced consumer line level -10 dBV, so that's +4 dBU versus -10. That's a large difference in level there. So you'd want to run it through. I really like the radial design, radial engineering products. I've used both the radial engineering box, the J ISO, and also the Art Cleanbox Pro. They both do get the job done, but you can very clearly feel how much better built radial engineering products are. Once you have made the proper electrical connections, you'd want to calibrate the input of your ATEM to the output of whatever you're sending out from the mixing console. To do that, you would typically send a tone generator, a constant level tone from the mixing console at a reference level of your liking. Most people do either -20 dBFS or -18 dBFS. And if you're pushing out that -20 dBFS out of your mixing console, you should line it up on the ATEM so that it also reads -20 dBFS, so that you're calibrated. What's happening in the console is also what you're receiving on the ATEM. And that will ensure, like, if it's sounding good on the board, it should also sound good in the ATEM. Should is a big word, though. And if you clip on the board, you're gonna clip on the ATEM as well, so you know what you're pushing out to your audience. Just another thing to add for myself, I'm not a big fan of the analog audio circuitry and also the analog to digital conversions found inside ATEMs and Blackmagic design hardware in general. I would highly recommend digitizing earlier in the chain before hitting the ATEM. If you do need to have the audio hit the ATEM, I'd take an audio to analog audio to SDI embedder and then convert that to HMI, bring that into the ATEM digitally so that you're not having to deal with the noisy and jittery circuitry found on ATEMs.
Go ahead, Marty.
Right. So everything that Mickey and Alexander and Jeff said, I will add that, reinforce rather, that the conversion between balanced connections and unbalanced connections is the most important thing. I will point out another device to look at. This is from Morley, who is famous for guitar pedals and such, but they have a pro audio line. This is a 2-channel device that converts balanced to unbalanced and 1/4 inch to XLR. It's a 2-channel device. This is a transformer loaded device, which means that it will also break ground loops, which is very handy. Now, so you can put in XLR from your mixer and take out 1/4 inch from the box. That will work, but you do want to be sure that you're using the right kind of cable. So the 1/4 inch will be balanced if you use a tip ring sleeve 1/4 inch plug. If you use an unbalanced plug, it will come out unbalanced. And you can get a cable that will have a TRS mini plug that goes into the ATEM, and at the other end have 2 tip sleeve 1/4 inch connectors, one for each channel, and that will set you up.
Next question.
Coming to us through the QR code, Reina Doppelpopulos in Situate is asking, how do you get that true, most excellent duodecahedral sound? We really want to hear even the tiniest subtleties and heard this is the way to go. Thanks.
Good, Marty.
Well, I'm a little confused because the information that I've seen about this is that this is a device that is an omnidirectional high sound velocity loudspeaker used in acoustic testing of spaces. I've seen nothing about this kind of device that is a microphone. So it's an omnidirectional speaker that is used as a sound source for acoustic testing in rooms.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm pretty much in the same boat as Marty. Duodecahedral sound to me is a duodecahedral speaker. And the reason that we're placing a bunch of speakers on sort of, well, a soccer ball, if you will, is that we're trying to create as close as we can to something that is conceptually a point source, which is a point source is technically infinitely small. But the important thing about it is it radiates equally in all directions. So it's an omnidirectional radiator. It sends sound equally in all directions, which a single speaker and a single instrument do not. They do have some directivity to them at different frequencies. And this is trying to send sound in all directions. But again, it's a test measurement thing. This is not something we use for listening to audio. So if there's something else that we're missing, please let us know and bring another question back.
Now, if you wanted to play something back that you recorded that way, I mean, could you use something like an ambisonic mic and capture stuff and then play it back into the speaker going in different directions? This would not be the way it's designed, but having it not the same sound, but the sound that was recorded in a small volume pushed back out of those speakers. Would that work?
I don't know. No, the speakers are not individually addressable. Sorry,
right.
Jeff. Speakers are not individually addressable. It's a single channel unit.
Right. They could be, though. Just imagining here. Imagine.
Yeah, I
don't know why you would use that. I don't know what you would use that for. I'm just imagining the possibility.
I'm getting your thought is you're thinking about ambisonics. The ambisonics mics is trying to capture sound at a point in space and get all the vectors from all directions. But then you're kind of like reversing that and sending out sound. You want to send out in the same direction. So it's kind of like a singularity where we've collapsed a black hole of sound and then it's now exploded back into a supernova. That's what you're looking to do with a
what's in my head though
speaker.
is that no one's ever done that. I'm gonna guess that what I just said no one's ever done before because it's dumb. You know, like but I now need to do it. So now I'm gonna have to try to find a dodecahedral speaker and then record ambisonic and then play it back out.
Why people?
I have a half of one, a hemispherical speaker. I think it's got 8 drivers on it.
I do remember NTI in association with Japanese broadcasting, like many years ago at an AES show, showing a global device that had like 45 microphones in it.
Yeah.
All recorded and processed separately.
I think that I see it. I don't know if it will work, but it'd make a great YouTube video. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think there is no U, by the way, in there. It's dodecahedral, which is a 12-sided sphere, I guess, with flat sides made of pentagons. I have, this is one of the speakers. Norsonic makes one for test measurement. And I think to be perfect, they usually have each speaker is separately amplified or with a division network that makes sure that each speaker is receiving exactly the same amount of voltage. And they can be separately amplified for each speaker. And I have seen, I couldn't find a picture of it right now, but I have seen situations in like giant theaters or things in the round where they have they don't want to have a speaker array that blocks vision. So they'll have these giant round emitters hanging above the audience that are probably dodecahedron or maybe they're mounted in a circle. They're shaped in the dodecahedron format, whether or not they were actually emitters. It was kind of popular in the 80s and 90s. And for some architectural device that could be used as a loudspeaker and add to the aesthetics of the theater without looking like speakers. But that's the only time I've seen something like this used professionally as a sound source for other than test and measurement.
There you go, Jeff.
Alex, I think for what I'm going to term your sonic singularity, that you're going to take your ambisonics mic and create that sound. I think you're looking for more something like this, which is a very immersive array,
Yes.
if you will.
That's, I need that.
Let me know when you want to build that, and I'll
your
come
own
over.
personal Dolby atmosphere.
I'm ready. Yeah, exactly.
Strap
that
on
looks
and
amazing.
a little thing, and you just travel around with it.
By the way, if you want to get in and ask these questions, of course, you can go to Makana and ask the questions, chat on the questions, vote on the questions. If you don't know how to get there, go to officehours.global/join, sign up there, and we'll start sending you emails, and you'll get a link. Next question.
Mark Sanderson in Chesterfield, UK, asking through the QR code, the local authority I work for needs to set up a committee room for hybrid meetings. There will be approximately 35 councillors, up to 12 staff, and a podium for members of the public to speak. Microsoft Teams for virtual participants. £140,000 budget. Recommendations?
Go ahead, Marty.
Okay, so committee rooms like this where there's a dais with sometimes they're judges, sometimes they're hearing examiners, any kind of committee room like this. This calls for a fairly sophisticated sound processor that can, where there's a microphone at each speaking position on the dais, and the processor does a very advanced form of auto mic mixing. And then the podium has a microphone as well, and there'd be a control panel for the whoever is leading the panel to turn that microphone on and off. And then that processor would also do the mix for that would feed into the Teams or whatever conference platform computer. And then there might be, if the audience is going to speak away from any particular microphone, there would be a microphone array in the ceiling, one or more of them, that can steer sound towards the sound source. That also gets mixed in with the processor. It's a fairly complex design that needs to be very well thought out and designed, and particularly for the control interface for whoever is going to turn this thing on and off and be able to control what it's doing. I would recommend finding a very competent consultant and designer who specializes in conference rooms. The other thing that goes along with this is being able to steer your cameras to based on the audio signal and which microphone is being active at the moment. So you don't need to manually steer your cameras to the person who is speaking. The cameras will be driven by the audio signal, and there are various ways to do that as well. So find yourself a good consultant and designer.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say as well. Like, find a systems integrator or consultant that can help you through this. Like with something like this, where it's a committee, you'd probably want to look into a conference system, like say from Bosch. There, Decentis is the cream of the crop in terms of conference room, microphone and voting and interpretation and all of that system. Like, so yeah, look for a systems integrator that can take all aspects into account when designing the system. And shameless plug, friend of the show, EIC of this very show, JJ McKenna is a very good works for a systems integrator and is a very good engineer and has done a lot of this.
Yeah, and we had the opportunity to think about this for an organization before COVID, in the pre-COVID days. Some things to think about also is the layout of the room. So you can build a lot of these things out. What we did for this, which it worked well. We had the podium of where a person could talk and present. We then built a circle like this. Now, it may seem like a crazy thing to do, but this is how people have it set up. And then we put our camera systems in here, and we had 3 cameras that went like this. And we softened the room as well, by the way. That's an important piece of the puzzle, is that for us, the room was, there was a piece of cloth, and then there was 2 inches, and then sound absorption. So it looked very smooth, but it was a lot of absorption, because you have open speakers and you have a lot of other things, and it just sucked up everything. So we just had no reflection in the room. It's the number one thing people make mistakes on within these rooms is they put a bunch of hard surfaces up. We definitely, one of the things that we did is we killed off any thought of whiteboards or anything else, but we did put up monitors on these 3 walls, and one above the person here, so that if you wanted to present something, no one had to turn their head. That was the big thing, is no one has to turn their head, cock their head one direction or another. They just look over top of people's heads to see what they wanted, what anyone was presenting against that. The mics went around. Now we didn't know about the we didn't know about the Decentis system, so we built a system that was using auto mix, and then also using the volumes, as it was said, to drive these. So we had point positions. It was important that we knew what the points were here, and then basically it would group them. It knew that these were in a certain group. And in our case, it was 24 seats, so it wasn't quite as many as you're looking at here. And then they basically had zones, and they would just pop to each person, whoever was talking, and any 3 could talk. If 2 people in one zone popped out, the camera would automatically pull out, just to include them, and it would know what they are. It took more time than we thought to build that geometry out. But basically all the cameras did what they needed to do automatically. They'd go to 2 shots, 3 shots, 1 shot, singles, back and forth. And you did almost nothing. We did almost nothing to watch the show. And it was a very aggressive show. Now the camera on this person here was actually over top of the monitor here that came down over like this. So it was a long shot of that presenting. We made sure that this monitor was not in that frame. And so there was no monitors in the frames of any of the cameras, unless they went to some of the wide shots. You'd see kind of the bottom of the monitors, but we did a pretty good job of not having them in there. It was the best experience that we've had in that kind of environment. When you talk about staff, everybody was outside. So we got another room that everybody, so basically there was 1 or 2 people sitting in chairs in the corner. Anybody else that was running the show or staffed or tied in, basically was in another room, in a control room, that was watching those things. But there was very little hands-on that was put together there. And it, again, I think there's a couple of them now. But that was probably 8 years ago that we did that. Next question.
Punsak Dorji asked the panel, "Hi again. We are looking at cameras to buy for our soccer tournament. The cameras are Z280 or Z200. Any other cameras from Sony that you suggest? Budget is $4,000 to $5,000 US."
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'd say that $4,000 to $5,000 might be a little too tight for a camera for this use case. You mentioned, Funchok, that it's for our soccer tournament. I don't know if it's just one soccer tournament or multiple or many of them. Will this be a reoccurring thing? If it is a reoccurring thing, I'd recommend perhaps trying to gather more funds for something like this. I'd budget, just for the lens alone, I budget $15,000 to $30,000 just for the lens, to get a sharp enough lens at a long enough of zoom distance. You'd probably want to go a minimum of 30x. These cameras that you mentioned are 17 and 20x zooms. You'd probably want a minimum of 30x, and if you can, go all the way up to like an 80x zoom for a soccer broadcast. So I try to gather more funds in terms of the camera body itself. Like, the lens is more important, way more important than the body. Like, the body will change every couple of years. The lenses you'll keep until they break. For the body nowadays, I'd probably look at the Sony FX6 on the lower end of things. I would have recommended the FX9, but they discontinued the FX9, I think, last week. The FX9 has a large advantage over the FX6 because it has gen lock input, which, in a lot of stuff that I do, we require gen lock. But if you don't necessarily need gen lock, then the FX6 is fine. But if this is just a one-off thing, rent, go to a rental house or hire a truck that comes with cameras for this one event, instead of buying cheap cameras and having to hold on to these cheaper cameras.
Yeah, I think that given the price if what you have is that's the budget you have per camera, I think that those Sonys are probably about as good as you're going to get there. The problem really is that as you go to a larger sensor, so I believe that the 280 and maybe the 200 are both. Well, the 200 is a 1-inch and the 280 is a half-inch sensor. So you have a little bit more low light in the 200. The problem is that as that sensor gets bigger, when you're doing really long zooms, you end up starting to get challenged with depth of field. So you want to think about that. The half-inch sensor, like a lot of times, we shift to 2/3 inch sensors for for things with long throws because we actually want more depth of field. It'll still look short when we get there. I think that in the price range for covering a sporting event or covering a group of sporting events, if that's where your budget sits per camera, I think that those are as good as you're going to get. As far as a kind of basic ENG camera, we see actually a lot of sporting events covered with these at high schools and smaller productions and so on and so forth. So I'm going to assume that that's what So, but when the budgets are lower, now we've covered these with. We've covered them with Blackmagic cameras and so on and so forth. It's pretty challenging because that sensor is so much bigger, and a lot of the lensing again becomes really expensive to do well. So one thing to think about is I believe these cameras do have some kind of controls, at least a Lank controller. You do want to move the focus and zoom off of the camera. So the only thing I would look at here is being able to have your focus and zoom controllers move so that you have focus on one hand and zoom on the other on your tripod. They're not as smooth as the ones that a lot of us are used to, but they can get you there. It's a lot easier than reaching over or even using them. You don't want to have the hand up on your zoom or on focus. And so if you can get those away from them, it works better. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like for a for a broadcast situation, especially one where you're doing a lot of complex, very precise moves at a long focal length, you want to have separate focus and zoom demands so that your controls are in the handles of your sticks or your pedestal, however you mount your cameras. But going back to the larger sensor, if you go with a camera with a larger sensor, like say if you go with something like an FX6. You can, if your operators if it's coming across as too shallow a depth of field, or if your operators are having trouble keeping focus, you can always, like, especially if it's daytime, or if the venue and your crew has enough lighting, you can always stop down to f10 or f12 or even f16 at 1,000 mil lens. That's still going to give you a sense of depth there, even if you stop way down. Another thing is with something like an FX6, compared to the other cameras that you mentioned, you can achieve relatively clean image even at higher ISOs. So even if you stop down your iris, you can bring up your ISO and still get a nice clean image compared to bumping up an ISO on these ENG cameras. It starts to get real ugly real fast.
Yeah, and I would say that, like, if all you're doing is sports, I'd still be tempted to use these cameras if this is all you're going to buy them for. But if you want a general purpose camera that's going to shoot great images, and then be able to use them for sports, I think the FX6s. I mean, I use the FX6 a lot, oftentimes intermingled with FR7s, and they are great cameras. But I would be tempted, if you're just doing straight sports, I'm going to do these all the time. Having something all compact without piecing things together, taking lenses on and off, means that there's back focus issues, there's dirt issues, there's all kinds of other things. And the fully built cameras, when you're in the field with a large crew that may not all be full-time employees, or large ENG crews, you may find that these all compact ones. I think those cameras from a Sony line, all I've had under $10,000 for these ENG styles have all been Sonys. I mean, these are kind of the newer versions. When I look at it, I go, oh, that's a newer version of an EX1. So I had EX1s and EX3s that I covered a lot of events with, and they were fairly effective at that. Next question.
Here's one from Douglas Carmichael. Allen and Heath released the 1.6 firmware update for the SQ series mixers yesterday. Has anyone had experience with their bus, SSL clone, and OptTronik, LA2A clone compressors yet?
Go ahead, Marty.
So I've been working with a church that has a SQ5 and an SQ6 recently, and this software upgrade is going to add a few really valuable additions. I have not tried these two compressors yet, but they look like they will work very well. So they are copies of or emulations of very famous, very well known optical and compressors. One for a bus or master output that kind of smooths everything out after individual channels have been processed. But I'm really interested in the rest of the software upgrade, the firmware upgrade. For these, it has the board came with 3 matrix outputs. The matrix outputs could be stereo or mono, but never more than 3. So this allows you to actually have 6 outputs. Scene management with a cue list will be very handy for theater production. And something very interesting, being able to smoothly transition between scenes. This is going to be very interesting with a crossfade option. I want to see how that's going to work. And redundant recording. So with this board, you can record either to a USB stick directly plugged into the top of the computer or from the USB-B output that goes to a laptop computer. Now you can record to both. So that would be very interesting.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, like Marty said, this is a new firmware, so most of us probably haven't used this. But I will just speak to Alan Heath's FPGA-based processing. Their processing is really good across the board, from their more cost-effective SQ stuff to the D-Live and Advantage stuff. And the nice thing about the FPGA-based stuff, which stands for Field Programmable Gate Array, is that you can really reprogram this. You can actually improve the sound quality through software, through these kind of updates. So it's really incredible, and it's cool that they've done this. Having used the original LA2A Teltronics and the SSL bus compressor, these things have been reverse engineered by a lot of companies. A lot of companies make emulations, but also clones in actual hardware. Warm Audio comes to mind, and they get really awfully close to the original. So it wouldn't surprise me if these software-based plugins that are built into the SQ are going to be really close.
Next question.
Beck Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, what are some good RTA mics or songs used for tuning a room? I'm using an X32.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So RTA mics versus good songs are unrelated completely. So what I would say is that for RTA mics, these are like time analysis, like alignment microphones for people who don't know. And so the idea here is to make your PA in your room as flat as possible, taking into account any kind of negative reflections or any issues in the room, right? So there's a ton of companies for this, and they range really things usable. I mean, to me, the best company is Earthworks, and I think they have a nice one that's about $500. You can go down like DBX, I think makes one for $130. Neumann makes them. I mean, there's a lot of options here. Beyerdynamic makes one that I think is like maybe $250 or $300, and they just don't make a bad product. Everything I love that stuff, and it's like they're kind of tanks. They really, really last. So for me, if you're going to be using something that you take to every gig, I would make sure that it's a quality unit as best as possible, just to make sure that you can keep on working as you go.
Go ahead, Marty.
So when it comes to...
Oh, we lost you, Marty.
Yep, I know. Okay, so when it comes to measurement microphones, they come in classes. Class 1, Class 2, and I think there's a Class 3. And what they relate to is just how flat they are, what the tolerance is for their frequency response. So a Class 1 mic is a fairly inexpensive microphone. You can get one for $100 or so. It may or may not come with a calibration curve, and you can use that representation of the microphone's frequency response, put that into your software to compensate for how unflat it is. Class 2 microphones will be flatter and will come with a compensation curve. and class 3 absolutely flat. So these are the devices that you would use with Smart or Open Sound Meter or an FFT that you would put up in a room and measure the frequency response and time alignment of your loudspeakers when you're setting up a room. This is how we do tuning. What music I would use for testing that would change depending on what kind of music is going to be presented in that show, because I would use different kinds of songs to test with depending on the genre of music. If it's a folk performance or a reggae performance or an acid rock performance, I want to be listening to different kinds of music that matches what we're going to be hearing during the show. There are several lists out there of preferred songs that top-end engineers, touring engineers like to use for different things. Too many for me to cite here, but let me try just a couple. So anything from Steely Dan or Donald Fagen. Supertramp, Breakfast in America was a very popular one. Get Lucky from Daft Punk is a very, very popular one. And for the one reason that not only is it well recorded, but it's very repetitive. And so you can be walking around the arena or your venue and pretty much hear the same thing throughout the entire song, so that you can compare one area to another area and see that, how even your coverage is. So there you go.
Alex?
Okay, so I use the really cheap Apex 220s, which are about $80. Now, a lot of these mics on the market have probably the same capsule. There may be some differences in terms of output, in terms of self noise with the electronics. But I know a lot of people that do big shows that are tuning big systems use these Audix TM1s. They're much more expensive. They're several $100s, I think about $300. And those will also work really well. If someone's paying you to do something that matters, you might want some of the TM1s. As far as what music or what songs should be used, I'm not going to suggest what songs you should use. You should use the songs that you know intimately well. That's the best way. I have my own set list that I like to use. Everybody's going to have their own. And then as far as tuning the room, another thing that a lot of people do is they like to use virtual sound check, which means that if you've recorded previously a multi-track recording of the band's previous performance, you can use that while you're tuning the PA. So using something like Smart and also using virtual sound check, those are very common techniques.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, very good points from everyone else. What I use is the Earthworks M23. It's $600 now. It used to be more affordable. If you want to spend more, there's the M30 and the M50, which M50 goes up to 50 kilohertz. I don't know why you would need that to tune a room, but it's there if you want to spend some money. I went to the M23 because that's what I see consultants from Dolby use when they certify Dolby mixing stages. It's a lot, like if I need to do a quick check on the calibration, it's a lot cheaper for me to whip out my own microphone that I bought just once than for me, like whenever we have to certify a stage or even certify a film for Dolby release, we have to fly in a consultant from Dolby from Singapore, pay Dolby, pay for their hotel room and all that. It's a lot cheaper for me to just spend one time, get a microphone to do a quick check on the room and see if the room is still well calibrated and nothing has shifted. In terms of the song to help you tune a room, if you don't have a technical or technical ways to or subjective ways to measure it, or objective ways to measure the room. If you're just using a song, I agree with Alexander that use something you know by heart, because that will trigger memories in terms of how things should sound. Second to that would be, it should be content that has information across the frequency spectrum from your lows, your mids, your highs, so that you can accurately, if you're mixing something that's, if you're playing back a song that was recorded in the 30s and has no highs at all, then you can't really judge the high end of the reproduction of the high end. Same deal with the other frequency ranges, and also having some dynamics in the song is also good, so that you can hear how the system, the sound, your system tuning or your speaker processing rather affects how the various levels of sound propagate throughout the room if you're doing any like dynamics processing on the system side of things. And also something with transients is also useful, so that you can know how impactful, like, a tight kick might be, or like, little like bright sounds that are very sharp transients. It's good to know how those are represented as well in the system.
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin is asking, I'm using Scarlet 2i2 for audio ingest into Zoom from a mixer. Can I input only one XLR into the Scarlet and get left plus right channel in Zoom for the audience? Using original audio setting in Zoom.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, first off, on the Scarlets and also most cheap or affordable audio interface, the XLR inputs are usually mic level only. So with most, you probably want to go into a 1/4 inch input, which should be a balanced line level input if you're feeding from a mixing console. You technically cannot get like a real true stereo sound from just a single XLR or 1/4 inch balanced connection, because those are just mono connections. What you can achieve though is send that single mono signal to both the left and right outputs of your audience via Zoom, and you can achieve that by simply not turning on stereo sound in your Zoom's audio settings.
Go, George.
Yep, just turn off the stereo mode. I had to do that to be on the show today and come out both channels because we're in original sound. And that's the trick. Also, if you're using audio interfaces beyond the Scarlet that are multi-channel driver, you'll notice that Zoom all of a sudden gives you the ability to choose which channels you're actually feeding into Zoom. My friend Tim Friedlander was a part of that, getting them to, during the pandemic, figure out how to send multi-channel into Zoom properly or remove channels you don't want to feed into Zoom. Zoom wants to hear everything. The Zoom sound driver, the Zoom sound input wants to hear every single channel at all times, and it's erring on the side of, well, we don't assume people know what they're doing, so we want to make sure whatever they plug in their mic, it's going to make it into Zoom. But you can actually choose only specific channels if your sound device is more sophisticated than a simple 2i2. But that's it.
And what's great is that Zoom actually, because there's production people that actually do work at Zoom that manage those things, it is by far the most powerful audio interface settings of any virtual conference. like when you open up, you go into the audio, everything else is like little kids' toys compared to what Zoom will give you access to.
I know. I don't know if I heard it here first, but you can't out-Zoom Zoom. It's very hard to in terms of that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Also, you want to be sure that the audio that you're sending to Zoom is a different mix on a different bus than what you're sending to any loudspeakers in the room. And so if you want mono into Zoom, then you just use a single mix bus, mix everything into that one bus, and it's mono.
Next question.
Next one's from the QR code. Michael Wren in Albany, New York. What is Office Hours using for live captioning that's viewable on YouTube live feed? If YouTube's captioning is a good enough solution, were any other options evaluated? What's the current best-in-class AI-based live captioning available?
Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, currently what we are using is just the YouTube automatic live caption set that's built right in. Were other solutions evaluated? No. We just turned it on because it's there and it's free.
Yeah, I have a lot of experience in captions. And so while we haven't evaluated necessarily for this show, I've used most of what's out there for captioning. By far, the EEG AI media are the clear leaders in this area. So EEG being the hardware, typically like a 492, that's going to embed things directly into the bank data of the SDI feed, which then can be delivered to most online services. As far as being able to do a pass-through as an AI solution in the cloud, AI Media is the leader, and both of them are the same company now. so either one of them, AI Media / EEG, are really the best ways to do it. For the reason we're not using it here is costs. It just costs more for us to do that. Maybe we'll partner with them to do it in sometime in the future. Next question.
From David Brady in New York City, New York. Want to dabble in immersive audio? Alex, is the 1-week rental of an AT-BP 3600 worth it at $150 Simolians? Link provided.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So this is another immersive mic. This is this crazy Audio-Technica thing. It's a $5,000 mic. Another option, if you wanted to dabble and you want to dabble a little longer than rental, if you want to go on the cheap end, the Zoom Handy Recorder is a little ambisonics mic. That's $250. So, and yeah, there's Alex showing it right there when we switch to Alex. That's gets you a purchase that then you can dabble for longer than a week. And you probably need longer than a week to capture various things and play with it. Yeah,
it is a little noisy. It's a little quirky. The interface is a little funky, but it is so much fun. And it's one of the best $250 that I've spent just being able to have something I can throw up there and hear ambisonic and play with the ideas. It's not something I would use in production, but I'm using it all the time to kind of think about ambisonic. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to recommend the Zoom ambisonic for $250 is to dabble, to get your feet wet. With the other microphone, it's 8 channels, and I think ambisonic level B or C, the next level up, uses 9 channels other than the 4 channels. If you're using ambisonic to create your vectors for immersive audio, so I'm not sure what's designed for. I
don't think it's an ambisonic mic at all. But go ahead. It's just 8 channels,
and you'd have to reproduce it in 8 channels surrounding the person to
go ahead.
True surround.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, the BP 3600 it's not ambisonic. It is designed to fit right into it's technically not a spec for it, but on the horizontal plane at ear level into a quad. Like, so each of those microphones are meant to go to your left channel, right channel, left side surround or left rear surround, and your right surrounds. And then the 4 other mics above are meant to go to your 4 height channels in an immersive format of your choice. If you want to interpolate a phantom center, you have to do processing with that. If you want to get an LFE, you have to do processing with that to high pass and low pass to get the low frequency to send to a sub if you want that. But yeah, at $150 US per week, I think that's a steal. But if you want, what I would recommend is if you want to really dabble and get your hands dirty with immersive sound formats, is that you take a mono microphone, walk around, record all sorts of sounds, and then place each one individually in a surround field in a DAW of your choice, Logic, Pro Tools, whatever. That's majority of the immersive or surround content that you're actually hearing, that most of the people in the world hear, is made out of individual mono signals panned around, precisely defined in terms of where they are panned to. It's a single microphone, like, immersive microphone like this, or a binaural microphone. Those just act as like basic beds that the real content is laid on top of.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm spending so much time on ambisonic right now is because I'm finding that when I record in spatial or in immersive, that I want to hear, what's missing for me is if I only have the mics that are recording the instruments and the people, it feels empty. So it feels very like it doesn't work. Like it's not working at all. So what we're doing is now starting to how do we grab some of the environment to mix back into it and play with ideas around what that actually looks like. We don't have a strong opinion about what that's going to look like, but we know that when we add a little bit of ambisonic back in, that it's sounding a lot more live-like, and we you feel more like you're there, because that's what we're trying to reproduce there. So I have this is the Zoom that I'm playing with, and I throw this in my bag all the time, and I just put it up on top of my camera. Sometimes I just set it next to it, just so I can grab some stuff and play with it. This is the next step up, in my opinion. This is the Sennheiser Ambio mic, which can go out to, you need at least a Mix Pre 6 or at least 4 inputs to be able to run with this. And then the other one that I'm going to be testing later this weekend will be the Voyage. I'm using the USB, which actually will tie straight into a iPhone. You can record all. Now, this is second order, so this is 8 mics. So the USB version, a friend of mine's lending it to me. The Dante version of this is what we see Apple using in their ambisonic recordings. So hidden in some of the Apple materials, you see the Dante version of this Voyage mic being used in what they're shooting there. Also, I have another one that I haven't tested as much, but I have this Core mic. It's a little noisy more noisy than I expected, but we have that one as well. And then the final thing that I'm playing with, which is not ambisonic, is not playing with it yet, but we're going to see if we can get a 5.1. This is a 5.1 DPA, and we're going to see if they'll lend it to us.
The bicycle seat.
The bicycle seat, yeah. Have you played with that, Jeff?
I've not. I've looked at that. One thing I just was looking at a paper the other day, and I need to dig that up, and we probably need to talk about it, but we're out of time today, is people are experimenting with using a ambisonic mic like the Zoom and a high-quality mic next to it, and using the spatial information, the spatial cues from the ambisonics mic to process a mono high-quality mic to create quality ambisonics. So they're not actually using any of the sound from the cheap Zoom mic. They're just using the spatial information. So the processing of that is crazy.
Oh, that sounds really cool. Yeah, so this has turned out to be a deep amount of water that we're diving into here. You'll see us keep on playing with it because, as I said, as we start to do immersive and spatial, and those are two different things. Spatial we define as 16:9, that is in stereo, and ambisonic is 180 degree, that's in stereo. But as we start recording more of those things, we're really seeing that we need to get more of the environment. We are looking at things like decatrees as well. The challenge with those is just setting them up. Like, these are nice because if I go out there, it's easy for me to just open up a mic and grab onto some stuff. So stay tuned. We'll probably have more to talk about in this environment related to that. I want to thank all the producers for all the great questions. We didn't get to all of them. We will, if you put them inside of Makana, they'll go back to your notes. You can bring them in another day. If you put them in through the QR code, we'll automatically bring them back and see if they get voted up on another day. We can't guarantee that any question gets in. We often end the show with a bunch of them left that we didn't quite make it to. But thank you so much for putting those questions in, for voting on those questions. Voting is really important, and for being part of the conversation inside of the chat. It really brings a lot to the show. And thanks to the panelists. What a great panel today. Just really, really deep audio knowledge and really detailed answers. And we just really appreciate you guys coming on Wednesday and sharing your knowledge with everybody. And we want to thank the back-end team. I know this was a stressful day. We had a lot of ghosts in the machine today. We would do this every single day. This is our 1,800 times we've done this today. And there was a lot of heavy work done to make sure that the show happened. We haven't missed a day since March 25th, 2020. And today was closer than normal. So I want to thank everybody for doing such a great job and making it seamless for all the viewers. I just wanted to let the viewers know that there was a lot of hard work, a lot of skin that was lost to make sure that the show happened today, and we just really appreciate everybody's hard work. Today, if we had done this in person, we would have traveled 26,000 miles. That's 42,000 kilometers, and that is 205 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. We made it.
Finish line ahead.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah, good job, everybody. Well done.
What an auspicious day to drop in and shill my product.
Thank you so much, George. That was really great.
Yeah, that was great, George. That's a really cool box.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
It's awesome.
It's fun.
How heavy is it? What is the weight of that box?
Okay, it's a really good question. I would say it's like
making
less
fun
than,
of me, for sure.
640 pounds in Europe.
It's definitely under a pound. I can tell you that.
Good to see you, JJ.
Nice.
Hey, JJ.
I would say
I'll be there soon, guys.
let's compare it to a iPhone 15 Pro. Within an ounce or two of an iPhone 15, maybe.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, half the price.
It's late. At half